Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 22 of season 2. My name is Tamara, and you're listening to Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Today's guest is Dorothy Stover, and she is a sex and love educator who studied tantric sex. We'll be talking about self-pleasure and spirituality and wherever the conversation takes us. So if you like this episode too, be sure to tell your friends about it. All right. Thanks for joining me today, Dorothy.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. And why don't we just get started? What do you want to say about self-pleasure?
Yes. So something that, right off the bat, self-pleasure versus masturbation. So to masturbate means to beat or to abuse. And for self-pleasure, coming from that space of pleasure and joy and taking care of oneself, I think there's a different energy behind it versus masturbation, which means to abuse. So it definitely adds in that just right off the bat, like why I tend to say self-pleasure versus why I instead of saying masturbation. Now I'll still say it, but it's just more of that making sure the intention of where I'm coming from and, supporting other people.
Yeah. And why do you say, I assume you think it's an important part for people to take a part in or to provide for themselves? Like what's the importance behind it, would you say?
For self-pleasure?
Mm-hmm.
I would say with self-pleasure, being able to experience self-pleasure is powerful on many fronts. One, the connection and embodiment to ourselves. It's a great healing tool. It's a great empowerment tool. And just to be able to, especially like using using pleasure to heal. Oftentimes maybe like through therapy or other modalities, we can get really into digging in deep into the emotions. Whereas it allows for the pleasure to reprogram the brain. Okay. And so it really helps to bring more love into your body and into yourself.
Yeah. And I would imagine it helps to then when you share with a partner to know what you like for yourself as well.
Definitely. Well, then you're able to, if you do know, then you can guide, and it makes pleasure sessions with a partner so it more pleasurable for them too, because they don't feel like they're doing some form of guessing game. And it was great, like on one of your podcasts, your guest, and I forget their name, but mentioned about how typical people that are born raised as men tend to not ask questions and just do something, and they have that expectation. And then for women, they don't explore what they actually like or what they actually want. And so this is, bringing that in. Self-pleasure, you really do get to experience that connection to yourself and then allow someone else to come in, which is vulnerability, which leads to greater intimacy.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. I think it's episode 14 with Leah Carey, and she talks about how to talk about it and how to explore. So yeah, that's a great minds think alike, because I was thinking the same thing.
So
yeah. And then what? And you said you bring spirituality into it too. So what is the combination of the two? How does that work for you?
I do. So as I have my own practice, my own spiritual practice, and I'm Christian, and coming from that basis, my faith has evolved over the years and changed, and really coming more into mysticism, I guess, where you're coming into the self and really being, your connection is a personal connection, one that is your personal connection with God, and keeping that focus on that relationship instead of it being outside sources telling you what to do and how to do it. And you're connecting with God directly to figure out your path. And so I found when I started adding in connecting with God with my self-pleasure or with a partner, the sex became mind-blowing. So I say like adding in God, being like, I would pray I would ask angels, love, and light to be with us or be with myself, and depending on my intention for the session, whether it was just to explore or to have fun or for healing, I would ask for assistance. So when I just found it went, from my own testing and experimentation, I found I could have, nice sex, great sex, to mind-blowing out of this world when I added in that connection to God.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that's how, because in our welcome episode, we talk about how Carissa, who's the majority co-host with me, and she was raised, religiously and Catholic, and so she didn't get to have sex till she was married. So it almost seems counterintuitive to bring that in compared to what a lot of people are taught, that it's kind of, bad or dirty or whatever is taught, or at least families maybe perpetuate that myth. So that's good to have that, especially for people that are Christian as well.
Right. And it's kind of wild, right? Like we close the door on, say, Jesus, or we close the door on God when we enter the bedroom. And it's kind of nutty. It's like God should be in every part of your life. And that's something even for, say, married couples, where all of a sudden it becomes dirty and don't want God to know I'm having sex, right? Or like that I'm enjoying my partner, or even that this is, so it isn't. And it's part of that too, that purity culture and being grown up or growing up in a purity culture or saving yourself for marriage. So many people don't know what to do when they get into that relationship, when they get married. They have no idea. They think, oh, it's all supposed to work out perfectly. And it's like, no, intimacy is something that you learn. Intimacy is something you're not born knowing how to be intimate.
Yeah. And I started out doing stand-up comedy, and I mentioned that a lot. Just, two virgins getting together, and it just kind of joke that it's like, like I can imagine, like, it's like the childhood game where you're trying to figure out which shape goes into which hole, is the way I joke about it. But yeah, it's interesting that, and then for people that aren't religious too, I mean, because some people have issues with the words God and Jesus. So even if you're spiritual and you think of it as the universe, or however you call it, but I like to be inclusive in this. So for all those non-religious people out there, it's also a spirituality aspect of just a bigger thing out there in the world.
Definitely. And you can be atheist and still have that mind-blowing connection. For there, it's more about following your intuition. And so maybe you talk to a part of yourself, a future self, or whomever you want to connect with, but that part of yourself where you're really following your intuition. And when you follow your intuition with a partner, you begin to tap into what you need in the moment, and you really become in the moment. So even someone who doesn't believe in God, is atheist, is still able to tap into many of those intuition skills, whether they believe in an afterlife or no God or whatever. There's still things to explore, and can be powerful with a partner. You're like, oh my gosh, like where'd that come from? It's like, well, I was using my intuition.
Yeah, and especially when you say the mind-blowing part. So, obviously that's intriguing for people that haven't had those kinds of mind-blowing experiences before, or too many of them. So, yeah.
Right, because if you don't know, you think whatever's happening is completely normal, or everyone goes through this, which very well could be. But there's always something to learn. There's always something to explore. Sure.
And then back to God, as you said, we were born with the parts that make us feel pleasure. So, some people like to say, use God's gifts. Like that's why they're there, is to procreate, and He made it enjoyable too. So it can't all be about procreation, because that'd be a lot of kids.
Yeah, no, and it's our whole body is a sex organ. So it's the whole body is a sex organ. God created us to feel pleasure. And the very fact that it can heal, and there's certain, for instance, can heal, gather connection that's beyond, especially when you add an intention. There is, from the tip of the penis, so for heterosexual couples, the tip of the penis and the tip of the cervix, both have lines straight to the heart. And so when those two come together, that means they're energetically, their hearts are touching. So it's like a powerful intention. And there's different parts, even there's almost like reflexology through the genitals. So you can activate certain parts of reflexology within the genital area that can heal different parts of the brain and heal different parts of the body too. So it's a very powerful healing tool. God built us beautifully to be able to self-heal and to heal our partner too, to support their healing.
Yeah, I've been watching Love is Blind, which is anyway, I'll just tell you about it. Yeah, so Love is Blind is on Netflix, and it's all about the emotional connection where people connect without seeing each other. And then within 9 days, at least season 1, 6 couples fell in love and got engaged without even seeing each other. And then a majority of them were happy once they saw each other as well. But and I won't spoil it by how many people make it, but if you do. And so it's seeing that evolution of, I can see where the emotional connection and then having that physical connection come when you're already there.
Oh, definitely. When I was a matchmaker, I used to wish, and actually I just was writing about this, about how I wish that I could set people up on actual blind dates where they couldn't see each other. Because you make so many judgments when you first see someone, or when you're talking with someone and you're seeing maybe their mannerisms, and so I think it's super powerful when you take that away and you get to know someone's story and share space with each other and hold space with each other. It's super powerful. You can fall in love with anyone if you know their story and if you leave space for it.
Yeah, it seemed, I mean, I never would have thought of that. And watching that show, I think a lot of people probably want to, maybe are more inclined to try it, or at least, like, I used to not be a fan of talking on the phone. I just assumed, like on the dating apps, I'd assume meet sooner than later and just see if there's chemistry or not. But now I'm like, oh, I'm going to add more phone calls in for sure. And at least it's very similar. And we talked about the spirituality part, or the tantric, whichever one you want to talk about more. Unless there's more to say on the healing, whichever thing you want to go for.
Oh yeah, well, tantric sex is the highest form of yoga, or I should say, tantra is the highest form of yoga, because it's not necessarily, it's not the only. That's one aspect, is the sexual aspect. But there's so many non-sexual practices in Tantra. So it's so much more than just the sexual part. And that is for healing, and that is for expansion and enlightenment. I haven't reached enlightenment yet. I don't even think it's a goal for me. It's just more about where I am and being in the moment. But it's definitely been a fun exploration. And it's that connection of your whole body, your mind, your connection to God, and bringing more intention into your practice. So just like with a yoga practice, everything's a practice. The way you're moving your body, with your breath work, with light, using different meditations, different visualizations, and using that to expand the body and to connect with your partner or connect with the self.
Yeah, I can see where that's helpful. And the clarification of, Tantra versus just having it. Because I think most people think of tantric as just like having really long orgasms. and it probably is part of it. But like you said, it's the practice and the connection to, I know I watched The Bachelor and Bachelorette, and they every once in a while they'll have couples like just face each other and look in each other's eyes, and that seems a great thing too. I would imagine that's part of
it. Is, yeah, you start to breathe together, and when you start to breathe together, you become one. Right, two whole bodies becoming one. So yeah, it is very powerful. There are many different practices with clothes on, clothes off, all of that. And there was something else you mentioned too about, right, a lot of people do assume it's just like, you're just having hours of sex, right? And that's not necessarily even really part of it. The foundation is more about that mind-body connection and the healing and and how pleasure can heal. It's funny. I remember some of the exercises while I was learning was self-massage for 20 minutes. I'm like, who has time for this? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like forever. And then like a whole session can be, hours but it's more about like the prep work and massage and just sort of going where the body's leading you and where pleasure is leading you. And then meditation and different things. So that can take a long time. And certainly for myself, like I don't have all day. You do have to sometimes, but that can be part of a self-love practice of like, I'm blocking off this time for myself or I'm blocking off this time with my partner, and making that date. So that can be powerful as well.
Yeah. And are there any, I know you said there's several practices around it. Are there any, just for the listeners that haven't done it, or is there any small practices you could share, like kind of like a couple examples of things?
Yeah, I think the best is creating a safe space. So the first practice I suggest is creating a safe space, really making wherever you want to practice self-pleasure or connection with your partner, pleasure practice with your partner, really creating a space that feels very safe and very warm and welcoming. So whether that's adding in different elements like different lights or just making sure everything you want to use for your session is right there. Any toys, any lubrication is always big. I personally love coconut oil when it comes to massage. And so I would say that's the first, is just really creating your space and creating that intention of bringing love into that space. That's a really beautiful practice. And then coming to meditation and breath work, I think is very important. So even if you don't do anything else, if you just create your space, create that intention, and put your hands on your body, like hands on your heart, hands on your belly, hands on your genitals, whatever feels good for you in that moment. And you may want to change that up. This allows, and then breathing, and maybe you even add in ohms, but just coming back to that heart space. And this really becomes centered in your body, more centered in your body. And then for that third practice, if you're ready for the next step, then just self-massage. Massaging the whole body, I think, is just a really great way. And then following the pleasure wherever feels good. So you may want to spend more time just rubbing your shoulders and sending love to that space.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about intentions. So that's kind of what you're saying, is sending love to different areas, or like thoughtfully touching yourself. I guess it sounds, self-massage sounds better.
Yeah. And that's something I would do when I taught yoga. I practice, and still with like meditations, I will, have people place their hands over their eyes, and then begin to send love to their body, and then massage the head, massage the face, and just work the way all the way down, and just seeing that love going into different parts of the body. And this is just it is a really great intentional practice, especially like if there is parts of your body where if you feel insecure about, just maybe spending a little bit more time there. Like for me, it's my stomach. So I like maybe feel a little more insecure. So then I spend a little more time massaging and sending love to my stomach. I may even say like, just really appreciating my midsection I might do. So yeah, it just depends on where you're at that day, but appreciation's huge.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question of how to send the love. But yeah, you're saying things like, all your organs are held, like in your stomach, in your torso area in general, like say stuff like that? Or is it more like thoughts, or do you kind of talk to yourself? Like tell us more about how to send the love.
Yeah. So either way, whatever. So if you want to say it out loud, say it out loud. I personally say it in my mind, and I just visualize that energy going to that area. I will also see swirling white light coming in through my body, top of my head. So that swirling white light is essentially the energy of God, and that love energy moving through. And healing as it moves through, and releasing anything that no longer serves me, and then infusing with love and light. So I will use that practice, and I will all the way down to my toes. And then I'll see that light move through the earth, grounding my energy. So when I've guided people through meditation, I'll use that as well to not only connect them with spirit, to the body, but then also to the earth, which is an important part of being a human, is to feel embodied, but then also feel connected to the earth.
Okay. And since you mentioned helping people through that, so how have you done it over Zoom, or would it in the past would it have been in person, or do you talk through people?
I've worked with people, so in person would do different workshops and different classes. And then I have the Nantucket Love School where we're pretty much exclusively online. I would love to get back to doing in-person events. And so I do find, because I have people that even though don't live on Nantucket, still want to be a part of the Love School. And so it's really wonderful to be able to meet over Zoom and work with people, whether it's pleasure or connecting with spirit or both, combining that. Been using different meditations to help guide people. And then I'll work with clients as well. And in every instance, I always allow spirit to guide. So every meditation may be different, or it could be the same, maybe as a different class, but trying to use intuition and listen to spirit to guide us for whatever the group needs in that moment.
Okay. And then I assume you also could do couples or singles or one-on-one kind of thing, or do you do mostly or all group classes for your school?
Yeah. So right now, group classes, I do work with individuals and mainly cis-born women whom I work with. That's who typically is more attracted to working with me. So yeah, that's been the most enjoyable. And you teach what you know, right? So that's my experience. I certainly have education in other areas, but what I know extremely well is my own body and my own experience, and then working with other women. So that's where I feel I'm able to support people the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, although I do talk about this in my stand-up again, where, especially oral sex, when it talks like for men on women, like we should know our bodies, but not all of us do. And we can't really say like what's working, what's not necessarily. So, but the more you do the self-massage and self-pleasure and understanding your body, you can, like we talked about earlier.
Science, doctors don't know bodies. As far as like female genitalia, there's still things they're like discovering. There's still things they're figuring out, because not a lot was put towards the female genitalia, because it's like, okay, it's in there. We can't really, there wasn't much discovery. There wasn't much learning. So we're still learning so much. And so it would make sense that someone else wouldn't know their body, because if somebody else doesn't know and you're not taught, then you may not even know that exists, or that, there's, over 30 ways to have an orgasm. Like, not many people are like, oh, of course I know that.
I definitely did not know that. I've thought of like two primarily. And I do know, I can't remember if I saw a documentary or read somewhere that the clitoris is basically the tip of the iceberg,
Yes, because everyone starts off female. So in the womb, everyone starts off female, and then that molds into either penis, or it molds into a vulva. So you'll definitely, it's actually very interesting, because if you start to take apart the female genitalia, and then you look at the male genitalia, it's the same, it's just configured differently. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then the clitoris, it can be a teeny tiny, or it can, right? There's no shape every woman's different for their shape of their whole vulva. And so you can maybe have a very teeny tiny, barely there clitoris, or you have, maybe the size of a carrot. So it all can be so different. And that's actually what's so important about self-massage, because if I had my diagram to show, I have The self-massage is super important because you start to get into those parts of the body. The clitoris goes more than just that tip. So you start to massage that area, and essentially it's almost like massaging like the whole shaft of a penis. So you need that, it can, be super beneficial, but then also just supporting the vaginal canal with being ready for any penetration that could be taking place.
I always use the word like when it gets engorged down there in general, like everything just feels better and you're going to orgasm easier. But and I know, and you also have your own podcast too. So I wanted to make sure we had time to share about your podcast and yours and how to get a hold of you and your school and the socials and all that. So
definitely, thank you. My podcast is Nantucket After Dark. So we talk about love, relationships, and anything else, combining in spirit. So just making sure we're talking about maybe subjects that aren't, maybe discussed all the time. And part of the reason for that was my grandmother. She, who has since passed away, but before she died, I would take her to some of her appointments. And one of them actually was her gynecological exam, and she hated going to her gynecological exams. And we talked about it and what was happening. And this was a few years ago, and before I started my sex education training, and so I was still very open. And with her, at her gynecological exam, her vagina atrophied. And so the doctor was like, I can't even fit a Q-tip in. And my grandmother has had so many exams where the doctor tried to force something in or like all these things. So she went through so much pain. And this was the first time that she didn't have pain because I told her, I'm like, listen, you're at the doctor's, you're in charge. It's not them in charge. They're doing the exam, but you need to let them know, like, okay, this is what I want. This is what I need. And as and there's a lot more to it, but so she really took more control of her body and being able to ask, but she's definitely from that generation, right? That you didn't ask questions. And so as we were talking about this, she was like, I want you to share this with other people so that she's like, people don't talk about it. Like no one talked about it. But also what I was learning at the time was that so she had hysterectomy, and that's why the vagina atrophied. And what I was learning at the time was you can support the vagina during that time, but then also to preventative measure. And she was like, what? So I could have been having happy years with my husband, but people didn't talk about it, right? They're just like, oh, you're 40 years old. You're not having sex anymore. You had your babies. You're fine. And so that's where she really wanted other people. She was like, I want you to share this with other people so that no one has to go through what I went through. And so yes, long story short, or short story long, that reasoning behind Nantucket After Dark is just making sure that we're having conversations that maybe are uncomfortable, but it's important to have because there's someone out there that needs to hear it. Someone else who goes, oh, I thought this was normal, and now I know there's something I can do that will support me. And I have an online school called the Nantucket Love School, so where we combined love and pleasure and spirit. And so that's been a really exciting ride, just guiding people on their intuition and tapping into their intuition. And we're adding in more pleasure into that realm as well, and different workshops and courses that will be coming up. So it's exciting.
Yeah. And what you shared about your grandmother, I had no idea that could happen. So good to hear. Like you said, people don't talk about it. I had no idea that was something that could happen. So.
Right. And now someone hopefully will be listening here and be like, oh, there's things I can do because I had a hysterectomy or because whatever's happening, menopause, and there's different exercises that they can do to support that, their vaginal canal, and then also their sex life so that they can have that pleasure and experience.
Yeah. And if they go to your website, is it just called Nantucket Love School, and they'll be able to find the resources and the stuff there, or the information? And then also, before you answer that, And then I was going to say, if you could provide any books or resources that you know of too, because each episode I try to provide resources and we can add it to the description. But yeah, first your website, since I interrupted you.
My website is www.nantucketloveschool.com. And books and resources. Yeah, so you will be able to find some information on there. One book that I just think is such a great book and fairly easy book to read is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. So it's this new science, and some things since she's written the book has changed. There's new science, right? There's new things we're learning, but it's a really great and user-friendly. And there's different exercises in there to really tap into the body and learn more about your body. And then spirituality, I would say for resources for spirituality, one of my favorite books is actually Spiritual Healing, and it's by Robert E. Deltzler. So it has different healing patterns inside, but really beautiful for healing and connecting with spirit and using your intuition to heal yourself, for self-healing.
Okay. Well, awesome. And thank you very much for being on. I loved everything we covered, and I always like to learn new things. So if there's any last minute thing, I think we covered everything, but if there's any last parting comment or parting shot you want to say, or we can call it good.
Well, oh my gosh. Well, I appreciate you having me here, and I can't wait to have you on Nantucket After Dark.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that too. And thank you very much. Hope you all enjoyed the episode. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if you found this useful or any of the other episodes, please be sure to tell your friends about it. We appreciate it. All right. And thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Dorothy.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Frank Talk, Sex and Dating educates.